It's Tuesday, the 28th of July, and I have a couple of days free. I thought we're allowed to go to Wales, so let's go to Wales. The aim of this trip is to head up into Brecon Beacons, take in the highest road in Wales, spend the night high up in the hills there, then ride on a major trunk road, and spoiler alert, the trunk road is currently closed to motorists. And then if I still have the energy for it, to ride up another country lane that is closed to motor traffic as part of the pandemic response, to complete a nice little 2-day loop. First though, we all need to cross the border. This is the old Severn Bridge, built in the 60s, and as is so often the case, the motorists ended up creating congestion, so they went and built a new Severn Bridge in the 90s. A couple of kilometres downstream. That would have been much more convenient for me today, make my journey shorter, but they built that without a nice walking and cycling path. I've done this crossing a couple of times before, but not in the past decade. I'd forgotten just how bouncy the bridge gets in the middle here when trucks are coming over. It's a relatively good path here alongside the Chepstow bypass. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's one of the better ones we have. Obviously it turns to shit at each end, but what can you expect?
The route today follows the National Cycle Network Route 42. I've talked before about not trusting National Cycle Network routes, or indeed other people's pre-planned routes generally, but I've checked this one in advance on Ordnance Survey maps and Google Earth. I couldn't really spot much that I'd have chosen to do differently. It takes us over the relentless hills between Chepstow and Usk, then up the Usk Valley for a while before more hills approaching Abergavenny from the east. The route is also part of Eurovelo 2, which runs from Galway to Moscow, which I won't be riding on this occasion, or on any occasion, because that's a preposterous concept. It was somewhere around this point that it suddenly occurred to me that I hadn't put a gas can in my pannier, so I stopped thinking about commentary and B-roll and focused on making sure I definitely didn't miss the closing time of the outdoor shop in Abergavenny. That's probably for the best, because this part of the route is all low hills, high hedges, small dairy farms. Pleasant enough, but ten a penny touring country where I'm from. Also at Abergavenny, it was time to top up my bottle and to take on some water for cooking and breakfast. Rather than waste plastic buying more bottles, I just consulted the refill app, which told me there were several taps I could top up at, the most convenient one being inside the same outdoor shop I'd just bought gas from. The final section of the day's ride was into the back mountains of the Brecon Beacons on Gospel Pass, the highest road in Wales, rising to 549 metres above sea level, with more than 200 metres of climbing concentrated in its final 4 kilometres. Now, my main job on these trips is getting the photos, so again, video took back seat for a while as I very slowly raced to catch the golden hour sunset light, while by this point also quite desperate to get my portion of pasta and sauce on the stove. So here's a little montage of this wonderful little lane winding its way up the valley, through the woodland, to get up onto the high moorland of the Black Mountains.
There's no film from the bivvy camp last night because when I got to the top of the pass and finished running around getting photos and sat down to get a cup of tea and a bowl of pasta going, that's when I discovered that the gas cans I picked up are not the standard variety, but are in fact some sort of weird proprietary fitting which looks almost exactly like the standard fitting but is slightly and subtly incompatible. So I had no tea and no pasta and was too grumpy to film anything else. It was though an excellent demonstration of the rule that you should always have more snacks on you than you think that you'll need. You never know when you might need to have 4 Kit Kat Chunkies, a flapjack and a banana for dinner. Anyway, this morning we've got the Wye Valley ahead of us and then we'll briefly drop down into it but then straight back out again, back through the Brecon Beacons on the A479, which is normally a very busy trunk road, which I'm hoping will today make for a bit of a cycle touring specialty because it's currently closed to motorists by a landslide. So hopefully we'll have something of a novelty.
This then is the A479 trunk road. It's one of those roads that in the language of the highways folk is partially improved and it ends up worse as a result. In places it's widened, realigned and bypassed, which has invited ever more traffic and ever more hurry. In others it retains its old winding ways and high hedges, and so it always sits near the top every time people compile lists of Welsh roads with the worst safety records. It's also one of those roads we see all over the country which over the years, increment by increment, has become a formidable barrier to cycling as fewer and fewer people bravely ever worsening traffic conditions, even for short distances to connect to quieter routes. Not today though. In February, Storm Dennis washed away part of the road and it still hasn't reopened to motorists. So today we get to coast all the way back down to the Esk Valley on a trunk road that has no traffic. I won't show the whole thing here, but I'll put it up as a bonus video for anyone who wants to ride along.
So I've just hopped down the Brecon Canal a short way, and I have to get up and over the hills at the heads of the South Wales valleys. Now my original idea was to go up over Le Blorange, the big hill here. There's a country lane up the side which has just recently been closed to motor traffic, turned into a cycling and walking route as part of the pandemic response. However, that's a very steep, tall road, a lot more climbing. I'm not sure that my legs are up to it after all of the climbing yesterday. So instead I'm going round it on National Cycle Network route 46 through, I want to say the Clydach Gorge, but I think it's maybe Clydach Gorge. Apologies to our speakers for that. So I hear that this route takes in some quite spectacular old industrial archaeology and railway paths in a semi-natural, semi-reclaimed by nature setting. So hopefully there'll be some interesting things to see there.
So this is it, the Clydach Gorge on the old railway line, closed in 1958. It's interesting to contrast the National Cycle Network here on its grassy surface on the disused railway because of conservation concerns, while down below, earth moving on an even larger scale than the construction of this railway widens the main heads of the valley's trunk road to be a dual carriageway. That's about it from this trip, because along here is where I ran out of GoPro memory card. But if you'd like to see more of these kinds of trips, please do let me know by pressing the thumbs up button below and by subscribing to the channel, or by leaving a comment to let me know what you're interested in seeing more of, or indeed just to correct my pronunciation of Clydach. Really just something to let me know that somebody really is watching these and it's worth my time recording more. And if you do, maybe I will.